The Tennessee Titans released their first depth chart of the season. I'll tell you why Quandre Diggs needs to be a starter on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We got our first depth chart of the season. I'm going to go through every single position and give you my biggest takeaways. We're going to start with the safety position where Quandre Diggs needs to be a starter right away. Also, we're going to talk about the trenches, and no surprise, T'Vondre Sweat is already a starter. And finally, it looks like Josh Whyle has caught up to Chig Okonkwo. So we're going to go over all of that. Before I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there. Tune it in Monday through Friday. If you want an everydayer, well, then you need to be one. Also, make sure that you throw a thumbs up on the video. If you're watching on YouTube, throw a tighten up down in the chat. But with that being said, let's dive into the first depth chart of the year. We are going to start on the defensive side of the ball. Again, want to look at Quandre Diggs at safety. So Quandre Diggs wasn't on the unofficial depth chart release for the Titans because when he officially signed with the team, they had already published it. So he's not on there. But my expectation is that Quandre Diggs will be right with Jamal Adams. Right now, you have Amani Hooker and Jamal Adams as the starters on the depth chart. Behind Amani Hooker, you have Elijah Molden. Behind Jamal Adams, you have Mike Brown. And then after them, you have Shaheem Carter, Keaton Ellis, Matthew Jackson. So guys who are fighting for a roster spot. But I want to stay up top here, and it may be Amani Hooker and Jamal Adams as the starters, but what the Titans do is when they have kind of a co-starter situation, which we're going to talk about on the offensive side of the ball more, they just do a slash line and then the next person's name. I think that's what's going to happen with Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams at that other safety spot. To me, you have Amani Hooker and you have Quandre Diggs. They need to be your starting safeties in your base defense. I've talked about it throughout the last few weeks after Jamal Adams had got signed, that Jamal Adams is more of a sub-package linebacker, a guy you want at the line of scrimmage, using his physicality to pressure the line. That's not what you're going to be doing as a traditional safety. So to me, immediately, Quandre Diggs needs to be listed as a starter. They could do a little slash with Jamal Adams next to him. They're co-starters in different situations. Whatever they got to do to massage the egos here of these veterans that they're bringing in. But no matter what the depth chart says, Quandre Diggs needs to be out on the field just as often as Amani Hooker, quite honestly. Quandre Diggs is an every down safety, and that's what the Titans needed even after they signed Jamal Adams. I continued to say the Titans needed to add another safety who could be more of a traditional safety, and you're going to get that with Quandre Diggs. So although he wasn't on the depth chart, I think that he will go as a starter and needs to be a starter when he is officially added. Now, I do also want to mention Matthew Jackson in third string here, okay? Again, the backup safeties are Mike Brown and Elijah Molden. Matthew Jackson is right behind Mike Brown, and Mike Brown is more of a veteran. He's got more experience. But Matthew Jackson has 3 interceptions in camp. Obviously, he's been playing well. So it'll be curious to see if Matthew Jackson can overtake Mike Brown for that 5th safety spot. I feel pretty comfortable that the top 4, Amani Hooker, Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, Elijah Molden, I feel pretty comfortable in them making the roster. But who will get that 5th safety spot? Will there be 6? I think Matthew Jackson can find a way to grab that. Also want to move to cornerback here. Obviously, you have the three starters that we all expect with Snead, Awuzie, and McCreary. Behind Awuzie, you have Trey Avery. Behind McCreary, you have Eric Garrower. And behind Snead, you have Jarvis Brownlee Jr. Now, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. obviously is CB4. I like Jarvis Brownlee Jr. a lot. Trey Avery, we know that he has a leg up. But really, I want to focus on Caleb Farley because Caleb Farley is behind Trey Avery as the cornerback 3. And to me, this is just another example of the fact that Caleb Farley is going to struggle to make this team. And I've talked throughout the offseason about the fact that I do not think that Caleb Farley is going to make this team, and seeing him behind Trey Avery and third string cornerback, even behind an Eric Garrower in the slot. I know Farley's not going to play in the slot, so it's not exact, but seeing Caleb Farley with that third team of Anthony Kendall and Robert Javier, Gabe Judy Lawley is also third string, tied with Caleb Farley. Tay Gowan, poor Tay Gowan, he's behind Gabe Judy Lawley. So if you're already behind an undrafted free agent, not a great sign for you there. But yeah, again, it just goes back to my point, and I hate saying it, and it does feel bad because you feel for the guy and everything he's been through. But it just, seeing Caleb Farley on this depth chart kind of solidifies that he's got a very, very uphill battle to make this roster. Do also want to talk about the linebacker group because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff at linebacker. You have your two starters in Jack Gibbons and Kenneth Murray. So that was what we expected. But the second string is Garrett Wallow and Chance Campbell. Who expected that? We have talked all offseason since the draft about Otis Reese, Cedric Gray, James Williams, and none of those dudes are even second string. I mean, Otis Reese is third string behind Garrett Wallow. Cedric Gray is third string behind Chance Campbell. And then James Williams is behind Cedric Gray. So, again, how many linebackers are they going to keep? If the depth chart stays the way that it is now with Garrett Wallow and Chance Campbell as the second string linebackers, not all three of Otis Reese, Cedric Gray, and James Williams are going to make this team. So the Titans are going to have some tough decisions to make. Will any of those young linebackers step up and actually carve a roster spot out for themselves? I think Cedric Gray is going to make it no matter what as a fourth-round pick, but Otis Reese is no guarantee despite all the love that certain Titans fans have for Otis Reese. And James Williams as a seventh-round rookie is no guarantee either. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch the linebackers play in the preseason, but for all three of those young linebackers who people were excited about to not even be second string behind Garrett Wallow and Chance Campbell, got to be disappointing for those guys and got to be disappointing for the Titans who would like to see more out of their young linebackers. So that'll be something to watch. Again, it's an unofficial depth chart. Things can change, but those are things that we need to watch for going into the preseason. But with that being said, we got to dive into the trenches. Talk D-line, talk O-line, talk edge rusher. Excited to dive into all of that with you guys. Before we do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, period. Full stop. I love Game Time. They have the best features in the industry. All-in prices on the ticket, so you actually know what you're going to pay. You get a panoramic view from your seat, so you know what you're going to be seeing when you sit down. And they have the Game Time guarantee, making sure that you pay the lowest price possible. It's summertime, and it's a great time to check out some Major League Baseball games. Summer, nothing goes with summer better than some baseball. So make sure you take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Titans fans, let's continue today's breakdown of the first depth chart of the season for the Titans. We talked about the back seven on defense. Now I want to get into the trenches a little bit because there's a lot of good stuff in there as well. Before we do, thanks again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. You're going to get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Locked On Fantasy Football. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, staying on the defensive side of the ball so that we can kind of cap things off there. We got to talk about edge rusher. We got to talk about the interior defensive line. I'll just quickly go through what the depth chart had to say on the interior defensive line. At starting nose tackle, you have T'Vondre Sweat. Starting defensive tackle, you have Jeffrey Simmons. Starting defensive end, you have Sebastian Joseph Day. Then on the edge, your two outside linebackers are Arden Key and Harold Landry. So no real surprises there. I think that was the expectation. And I mean, when you draft T'Vondre Sweat 38th overall, the expectation is he would be a day one starter. So no big surprises there. But again, a lot of the rookies, if you go through this depth chart on offense and defense, a lot of the rookies are third string, fourth string. So when you see a guy like T'Vondre Sweat, who's a starter right away, I mean, you got to give credit where credit is due because the Titans clearly aren't just elevating these rookies for no reason. They're making them earn it. And if T'Vondre Sweat is already listed as a starter, although that was the expectation, well, then he's definitely earned it. Okay, but I want to get away from the interior defensive line because quite honestly, other than T'Vondre Sweat solidifying a starting spot already, there isn't a lot of surprise or intrigue there in my opinion. You have Keandre Coburn behind Sebastian Joseph Day, Quinton Bohanna behind T'Vondre Sweat, Marlon Davidson behind Jeffrey Simmons, and then behind Marlon Davidson and behind Jeffrey Simmons in third string, you have the undrafted free agent rookie Isaiah Iton, and then TK McClendon, who the Titans gave a contract extension to. It wasn't anything super lucrative or anything like that, but it kind of caught me off guard. Again, I don't like any of these backup defensive linemen. Coburn, Bohanna, Davidson, McClendon. I don't like any of them, honestly. I don't think any of them are certified NFL players. I think most of them are practice squad level players. But TK McClendon got a show of faith from the Titans organization. So for him to come out as third string, I know he's been dealing with some injuries throughout the summer practices and stuff like that, but you know, a bit of a surprise there, but move it to the edge, all right, because that's really where there's some intrigue, in my opinion. So, of course, you have Arden Key and you have Rashad Weaver as your starters. No surprise there. Or Arden Key and Harold Landry. It would be a surprise if Rashad Weaver were starting over Harold Landry, that's for sure. But seeing Key already win that battle over Weaver right now, look, Weaver is a bigger, more physical guy, so I was thinking that maybe he would have an advantage to be that base starting down outside linebacker because he could be better against the run. But the reality is that Rashad Weaver has not shown that so far throughout his career. So if he's not going to be an improvement on Arden Key in run defense, and Arden Key is a better pass rusher, then it only makes sense that Arden Key would get that starting spot. But behind them, behind the starters, you have Rashad Weaver behind Harold Landry. And then you have Shane Ray, the former first-round pick from 2015, who hasn't played an NFL game since 2018. He is second-string edge right now. I mean, that's unexpected. I mean, I know that they were excited about Shane Ray. We all were excited to see what could happen there. But again, he hasn't played an NFL game since 2018. It would not be crazy for a rookie to be better than him. I mean, Thomas Rush, Caleb Murphy. I wouldn't have been shocked to see Shane Ray last on the depth chart. But he's ahead of Jalen Harrell. Now, Harrell is behind Key and Weaver, not Landry and Ray. He's the other outside linebacker spot, but still, to see Jalen Harrell, third string after the good camp that he's had, behind a guy like Shane Ray who sits on the second string level, that is a bit of a surprise. And Caleb, despite Thomas Rush getting some pub throughout the summer, Caleb Murphy is still ahead of Thomas Rush on the depth chart as well. Now, they're both in the third string column with Thomas Rush being fourth string, but you know, both of them, all three of those names I just mentioned, Harold, Murphy, Rush, all of them being behind Shane Ray already, that's a good sign for Shane Ray, and hopefully he can contribute. And I personally have been talking about the Titans, you know, bringing in another edge rusher in free agency, but if they're that happy with Shane Ray, maybe Shane Ray is that free agent. They feel like they've already done that, so there's no need for that to take place. I would not be shocked to hear that that's their mentality, especially based on this depth chart. Now let's swing over to the offensive line. And I don't think that there's anything shocking on the offensive line. Personally, you have J.C. Latham starting at left tackle, Peter Skoronski starting at left guard, Lloyd Cushenberry starting at center, Sadiq Charles starting at right guard, Nicholas Petit-Ferrer starting at right tackle. All right, so first and foremost, no real surprises, but what I will say is Nicholas Petit-Ferrer was only back at practice for a couple of days, and people have been hyping up John Ojukwu all summer long. Well, I tried to tell you, John Ojukwu is not going to start on this team, and if he does, it's a disaster. Like, that would be not good. You know what I mean? So, to see that NPF, with just a few days of practice, has already jumped over John Ojukwu, who got the starting reps all summer long, kind of confirms exactly what I've been trying to tell you guys. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want John Ojukwu starting at right tackle, folks. I'm just telling you that right there. So the starters really aren't that surprising. But you get to the backups. Backup left tackle, Jerron Christian. Backup left guard, Andrew Rupsich. Backup center, Daniel Brunskill. Brunskill isn't even listed as a guard. Backup right guard, Dylan Radens. Backup right tackle, John Ojukwu. A couple of takeaways here, but it's mostly about the third string. So, the Titans traded a 7th-round pick for Leroy Watson. He's third string. They brought in Jerron Christian, and Jerron Christian has already leaped over Leroy Watson on the depth chart. So, to me, you look at that, okay, so Leroy Watson was playing terrible, and they were like, all right, let's get Jerron Christian in here. We know he can be a backup. So, to me, that's that answer. Is Watson disappointed? And they brought in Christian to actually be what they hoped they could make out of Watson. So, makes sense there. Also, again, Daniel Brunskill, not even listed as a guard. So, it's interesting to me that Daniel Brunskill is purely the backup center. They're not even working a minute guard. And then they went out and got Corey Levin. You're only going to keep 2 backup centers at max on the roster. So, why go get Corey Levin if you know that you're keeping Daniel Brunskill and he's your backup center? Just makes you ask questions, Just makes you ask questions there. Now, Cole Spencer, an undrafted free agent who I really, really liked out of Texas Tech, he's 4th-string center behind Corey Levin. So you could also spin that as, well, they need 3 centers to run the 3 full teams of offense in the preseason. And if Cole Spencer was disappointing, then adding Corey Levin is more about Cole Spencer being a disappointment than it is Corey Levin challenging Daniel Brunskill. That's fair too. So one last thing here. Jalen Duncan, 3rd string. He already got passed up by John Ojukwu. Guys, I tried to tell you when Jalen Duncan was signed or drafted, did not like the pick. Wasn't a big fan of Jalen Duncan coming out of college. Didn't think he was an answer last year. And he's probably not going to make the team. So, just saying, I tried to tell you guys. Tried to warn you about Jalen Duncan. But with that being said, we do got to move out of the trenches, talk about the skill positions on offense, and a little bit of special teams, because there is a very interesting name in a starting spot on special teams. Mason Kinsey, can you hear me? Before we dive into it, though, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Look, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. It's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. fans, let's cap off today's breakdown of the first Titans depth chart of the season. We've gone through the back end on defense. We've gone through the trenches on defense and offense. Now I want to look at some of these skill positions on offense and some special teams. Before I do, though, do want to thank you guys for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Again, now go check out Locked On Fantasy Football. You get your daily insights to have the best fantasy draft possible. You got to find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football down in the description. You don't even need to search. It's right down there in the description. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. But, again, looking at the offense, the number one takeaway for me for the skill position players is Chig Okonkwo and Josh Whyle are co-starters at tight end. It's not Chig Okonkwo first string, Josh Whyle second string, and then Nick Vannett third string. No, it's Chig Okonkwo, a slash, and then Josh Whyle. Okay, last year, Chig Okonkwo was certifiably ahead of Josh Whyle on the depth chart. Certifiably ahead. But not now. Now they're co-starters. And I don't know if I need to break this down into simpler terms or not, but I will. If you're running a race and you're ahead of someone, and then next time you check, they're even with you, well, they have caught up to you. So Josh Whyle has definitely made progress this offseason. He has caught Chig Okonkwo. And I think as we get into the season, Whyle is only going to continue to not only catch up, but pass Chig Okonkwo. I think Whyle makes a lot more sense on the early downs. You can work Chig Okonkwo in on third downs and passing situations and stuff like that. But Josh Whyle has more of a skill set and more of the body type to be an every down starting tight end. And Chig Okonkwo, which has kind of always been the case, is a perfect number two complement tight end who can be used as a weapon, line him up in the slot, put him in motion, have him go across the formation. That was always his best role. So having Josh Whyle emerge, absolutely critical for the Titans because it puts everybody in their right spot. Nick Vannett is the tight end 3. Chig Okonkwo is your matchup tight end 2, and Josh Whyle as your traditional wide tight end starter. So really like seeing that for Josh Whyle, something we've been talking about all summer long. You go to wide receiver, no real surprises. Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, DeAndre Hopkins is the starters. Behind DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks. Behind Calvin Ridley is NWI. But behind Tyler Boyd, Kyle Phillips. And behind Kyle Phillips in the slot, Mason Kinsey. So Jaquan Jackson, who we thought would challenge Kyle Phillips for the backup slot role, isn't even Kyle Phillips' backup. He's Mason Kinsey's backup. Jaquan Jackson is the 4th string slot receiver. That's a bit of a surprise. I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit more when we go over special teams, but as this depth chart reads right now, I don't know if you could have Jaquan Jackson on the team. I don't know if you would be able to do that. If Kyle Phillips is truly 2 people better than him at slot, I mean, dang, man. Dang. But anyways, moving away from wide receiver, running backs, we have another co-starter situation with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears with the little slash between them as co-starters. And then Hassan Haskins as RB3. Look, when we talked about the running back spot earlier this offseason, it was a question of, do you want somebody who's maybe a better runner, but not as good on special teams and not as versatile, Julius Chestnut? Or do you want somebody who may not be the most explosive runner, but is good in pass protection, is more versatile as a running back, and is a much better special teams player? And if Hassan Haskins, just as a running back, is in 3rd string already ahead of Julius Chestnut, well, I'm pretty positive that Hassan Haskins is going to be RB3 and make this team. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Malik Willis, 3rd string quarterback. Will Levis, Mason Rudolph, Malik Willis. Guys, I'm telling you, we can get as hype about Malik as we want, but that is not going to change. Okay? Mason Rudolph has been excellent in camp. He's completing 84% of his passes in training camp. Mason Rudolph is better than Malik Willis. So will they keep Malik on the roster is the question that we actually need to have, I think. But moving over to special teams. Obviously, Nick Folk, Ryan Stonehouse is the starters. Morgan Cox as well. No surprises or anything to discuss there. Look at the returners, though. Starting punt returner, Mason Kinsey. And then you have Kearis Jackson and Kyle Phillips behind him. Then you go to kickoff return, and Tajay Spears is the starter for kickoff return with Kearis Jackson behind him and then Jaquan Jackson behind him. Now, you could say that the Titans only put Mason Kinsey as the starting punt returner because they want him to be the punt returner during preseason so that they don't take unnecessary hits against their other guys who they're actually going to use in the regular season. I would understand that. But if Mason Kinsey was the best punt returner the Titans had last year, and if they really want a solid punt returner and don't feel comfortable with the other options, I could see Mason Kinsey sliding on. But the problem becomes then the Titans would have to keep 7 wide receivers because Mason Kinsey's not better than Kyle Phillips. All right, so you can't let Mason Kinsey play slot receiver over Kyle Phillips. He's simply not as good. So are you keeping Mason Kinsey in a designated punt returner role? If you keep 3 quarterbacks and then you do that as well, I mean, that doesn't leave you much room at wide receiver, O-line, defensive line, linebacker, tight end, safety. Like, there are other positions where there are better players worth keeping. So I just want to give Mason Kinsey some credit here. Starting punt returner, but I also want to point out too, where's Jaquan Jackson? Jaquan Jackson not in the punt return group at all. He's third string in kickoff return. This is a guy who we thought could be a starting returner right away. That was the expectation, is that the rookie would be the starting returner right away. Well, if he's not a starting returner, he's not a punt returner at all. He's third string on kickoff return, and he's the fourth string slot receiver. How do you keep Jaquan Jackson on the team? So he's going to have to jump up the depth chart quickly here in the next few weeks if he wants to certify a roster spot. Because right now, things are looking tough for the rookie wide receiver. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me today. That is my depth chart review. Obviously, it's unofficial. Things can change, but very interesting initial look here. Tomorrow, the Titans are back out on the practice field. So I'll be here to break that all down with you guys. But as always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.